Hello, valued listener. Thank you for tuning in again for Let the Movie Speak. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The audio quality on today's episode is sketchy at times, but thanks for hanging in there, and our guest has some awesome things to say. We hope you enjoy it in spite of that.
There's no one I, is there?
Why do you ask that question?
You're a gayman. I'm glad you growed up a gayman.
Now I know who you are. The churchyard. The churchyard on the marshes. You're the convict I gave the food to.
You acted nobly, my boy. Noble Pip, and I've never forgot it.
Let the movie speak.
Greetings, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Let the Movie Speak. My name's Travis,
I'm Justin.
and we are so gracious and excited to have a special guest with us today.
We're so gracious.
We're gracious. She's lucky
We're
to
just
be here.
tooting our own horn, huh? Right
No,
off the bat.
She's lucky
Cool.
to be here. No, we are grateful and gracious and full of grace to be here. It's our friend Ellie. How are you doing, Ellie?
I'm doing just fine. I am gracious to be here also.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you. That's probably more accurate if we're honest.
Yep.
You're a good friend and a bit of a bookworm. And I think when I asked you to be on this episode, I was like, "Hey, do you want to do the podcast? We're doing Great Expectations." I assumed maybe you may have read it because you read like 5,000 books a year, and you were like, "That sounds amazing," but that's the one Dickens book I haven't read practically, right?
That's right. Yes, I have read lots of other Dickens, and I actually just bought a copy of Great Expectations the other day, and it is actually on my summer reading list, which is really funny. But no, I have not read Great Expectations.
Well, now you don't even need to
I know.
because you've seen the movie.
Because the movie just really scratched that itch for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's your favorite Dickens? That's a good question of what you've read.
I think it's A Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have unintentionally started really with the longest Dickens, and I have unintentionally worked backwards from how long they are.
Yeah.
So I have in my mind that all Dickens books are 1,000 pages long, when really that's actually not true. Great Expectations is only about 500 pages, which, considering Dickens, is not all that long. And what I tried to do with the last Dickens I read, which is Bleak House, so he published it in installments, right? So he would do 2 or 3 chapters at a time. So I tried to do that as I was reading through it. And so I would read a chunk, I would read what he would publish, and then I would be done for the day or a few days or whatever. And then I'd come back and pick it up again in the next installment. And you get those mini arcs that he worked in. And I feel like it makes Dickens come alive so much more, because it feels a lot more like watching a TV show where you're kind of, doing it episodically. So yeah, I'm a big Dickens fan.
Cool. Yeah, to foreshadow a little bit of the conversation around Great Expectations. I think there might be some value in that approach. Maybe not all Dickens, but this was released the same way. So before we get into 1946's Great Expectations, we're gonna do what we normally do. Justin, what do we normally do?
We talk about what the heck we watched this week. I neglected to mention the prizes.
Yeah, please tell us. What are the prizes?
Okay, first prize is you get to go first. What'd you watch this week, brother?
I was just about to stick you with first, but that's fine. I'll go first. I went to the movies, huzzah, and I saw a film by a Chinese director who is of note to not just Chinese audiences, but the world, because he's got a bunch of titles that have broken through to international audiences in some ways that Chinese films don't always do. But this is a movie called Cliff Walkers, and it is a 30s period piece about a group of people who are communist special agents who are returning to China, and they have a secret mission to infiltrate. And it's very spy-y, thrillery, kind of interwar period. Interesting, tense stuff. And I would say if you like kind of like bloody action thriller and you kind of like wartime stories, twists and turns, that kind of thing, it could totally be for you. I will say, like, the one thing that struck me is I think I asked you, Justin, before I went to see it. I don't remember what the other option was. It's like, hey man, I could either see this. Oh, it was Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is just like in some weird re-release right now in a bunch of theaters, which I haven't seen and I'd like to see. And I was like, I could see that, or I could see this. What do you think? And you were like, definitely go see Cliff Walkers. And I was like, okay, done. And this movie, if you hear like, oh, well, this is a, period piece thriller about, a bunch of people who are trying to infiltrate, from the from the Chinese government in to get spy and find information on the Japanese. I think for people like me who are, mostly just ignorant folk to a lot of that real specific like geopolitical history, and the sort of sentiments that swirl around in different time periods towards different countries, it's just different. You know what I mean? Like the types of these movies that I'm used to are like, break out of prisoner of war camp movies where people dig tunnels and drive motorcycles and might be Steve McQueen, and this is just a different perspective, but strikingly similar in form to a lot of those. So if you like those movies and you just want like something different and new and fresh, it's got some really good stuff in it, like great action sequences, and like specifically one car chase that is memorable and really interesting. So yeah, that was fun, and I'd recommend Cliff Walkers if you like that sort of thing. What did you watch this week, Justin?
I had the distinct privilege and was gracious to my children and took them to Raya and the Last Dragon. Normally, they're not fed. We sit in a dark room,
Right.
And that's kind of it. But no, on this last Saturday, I took them to see Raya and the Last Dragon. Thank you, Disney, for another movie that
All
is
hail
for children.
Disney.
Yeah.
Content maker of all things. Yes.
It was kind of a bummer, and this is why. Because maybe similarly, how we're gonna discuss our movie today, Great Expectations. This movie it has all the pretenses of being a movie. There is a plot, but it is so freaking perfunctory most of the time. Where there are interesting elements that are never really developed. A lot of things just seem like, hey, let's get from point A to point B. It's beautifully animated, of course, because it's Disney, but it doesn't save it. It doesn't really make it good. And so in the end, and not only this, but more so than most other Disney movies, the plot just makes little sense. So thankfully this movie has dragons, so I guess the children forgive that, right? Because I don't know about you, I like dragons. And so here's kind of the...
And then you said you like dragons. So.
Yeah, the children, whatever, dude. I'm there for dragons. My kids didn't even want to see that. They're like, Dad, I want to see Cliff Walkers. I was like, hey, get in the car. We're going to go see this movie with dragons. And so they did, begrudgingly, and there were tears. But here's the thing. This movie, the kind of overarching plot of this movie and why this world or this nation is in a fractured state is because there's some kind of creature that is sort of in the ether, and it takes this very amorphous shape, kind of like purple smoke, and it turns people to stone. And according to the dragons, that exists because that is what is in people. That is what causes strife. As long as there are people, there will be this potentiality for this amorphous thing to take people over and turn them to stone. That's a really interesting concept, I think, that any other movie could have done something with. It's not really, that's just kind of the villain in this movie, and that's all. What I've told you is all the explanation you really get about it. Anyway, dragons fight on behalf of humanity in this movie. Thank goodness, because I want to see some freaking dragon action. And the higher they fly, the more my bottom is glued to the seat, okay? And it's just like, oh, cool. What color is that one? What magic does that dragon have? I want to be writing down their names. It's hard. People are like, sir, turn off your flashlight. But whatever, they're just going to have to deal with it. So here's the thing. The dragons, okay, save humanity by doing this. The last 5 dragons that exist, they're like, hey, we're all dragon siblings, okay? Check it out. We've got different magic. Here's what we're going to do to defeat this amorphous monster thing. We're going to take a little bit of magic from you and a little bit of magic from you. And so they all put their magic together in like a glowing magic ball thing, okay? And they give it to the last dragon, okay? Thus the name of the movie.
Like the movie name.
Yeah. And so they sacrifice themselves, and somehow the dragons get turned to stone too. It's not really explained why, because they're not people. But anyway, who am I to judge? All right, so dragons have now all turned to stone. There's one dragon left with magic Dragon Ball. Not like that Dragon Ball show. Okay, this is a different Dragon Ball. And they've got their Dragon Ball. No Goku involved. And then the magic goes out of it and just destroys all the evil creatures, okay?
Yeah.
And then there's Peace in the Valley, okay? Johnny Cash does his rendition.
How many references are you going to pull?
It's all hunky-dory, okay? Now, fast forward. Here's a problem. The monsters are coming back. Why? Because the Dragon Ball got, like, fractured, okay? People were fighting over it. That's going to bring some bad juju, and it does, which drives kind of the whole movie. Anyway, this super long-winded explanation to tell you that at the end, the solution to the problem is to put the pieces back together.
Right.
And then the magic goes out again.
Right.
And this time it destroys all the bad stuff, and it brings all the dragons back to life with no explanation.
Cool.
Whoa.
So, I don't know. I just, like, my kids had questions. I won't even bother, because I've already taken up way too much time. But, I mean, dragons are cool.
I think we should just shift gears. I think you should.
Yeah.
You should read
That's how I shift gears.
screenplay to us.
Yeah. Well, it's coming. It's coming. How much time do we have? Okay. So, here's the thing. My kids are saying, Dad, what was this? What was that? I don't know. It's not the usual, like, go get me another Coors Light. I don't want to talk to you right now. It's like, I really don't know, kids. It didn't make sense. So, anyway, Raya and the Last Dragon. Let me pass the baton to Ellie. Ellie, what did you watch this week?
Wow. Well, I love dragons also.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Am I the only one that doesn't love dragons?
I love dragons.
Oh my gosh.
Love them. But
Welcome back to Dragon Cast, everybody.
Yeah. Besides dragons, I also really just love crime in general.
Good segue.
So this week I watched Fear City, New York versus the Mafia, which is a Netflix documentary that came out recently. And Netflix totally gets me when they they put a new show up and they give you a little preview when you log on, and it's like, okay, I'll just watch that.
I hate it, that,
but also
Ellie.
it just
hate
like
that so much.
I know, but it totally gets me. So I watched this and I did actually really enjoy it. 3-part documentary series on the FBI's takedown of the mafia in New York, and the 5 families. And it was really fun because they interviewed a bunch of old mafia people, and then they also interviewed a bunch of the cops that were involved in the takedown.
And several dragons, I assume.
There were also a couple of dragons involved.
Yes!
They were undercover, and really essential to the prosecutor's case for sure. But it was really fun because my favorite guy on the documentary was the guy who had to plant the bugs in the mafia bosses' houses. And he literally what they did is they messed with one of their phones so like the phone would stop working. And he literally showed up as a phone repairman, was like, I got to repair your phone. And then just like walked in, put a bug in the phone, and then was like, okay, your phone's good. And And like that's how they bugged the mafia bosses' houses. It was amazing.
That
It was
actually happens in a Pink Panther movie, I have to say. That is a literal, like, that's a plot point from a Pink Panther movie where Peter Sellers shows up in a ridiculous wig and he's like, phone's right there, you know, like that happens.
That's where they got the idea, dude.
You're right. Pink Panther is
that's where the FBI. Yeah, that's where the FBI got the idea.
Oh, the FBI. I was going to say Pink Panther is grounded. You're saying they got the idea from Peter Sellers.
From Pink Panther.
Yes,
absolutely, they
course.
did.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I watched this week. It was a really good time.
Nice. Well, I'll get to that right after I watch apparently every dragon movie ever made because I'm missing something. I got a hole in my repertoire, obviously.
It's not just movies, dude. It's books, pictures, photographs, because they're still out there. Okay, we got it. We'll get you up to speed. Okay, it's not really pertinent for this podcast, but we'll get there.
You could have fooled me. Let's get into something that has 0 dragons as far as I remember. 1946's Great Expectations. So in our intro section here, we'll just give some context and put some kind of a backdrop for this film to exist. Obviously, it's 1946. We are, 4 episodes in at this point, and we can't really talk about a movie from the 40s without talking about that it's, wartime. So that probably plays into this one less aggressively because this is a Dickens adaptation, other than maybe we can get into the idea of escapism and that kind of stuff, which we've touched on before. But this is adapted from his novel, which Ellie so astutely pointed out. Like many of Dickens's works, was released serialized form, so in a periodical, and then we know it as the bound book. Great Expectations. This is, for reasons, the 5th greatest British film of all time, according to BFI. It's the first British film to win an Oscar for cinematography. It also won for art direction, and it got nominated for a couple other things. And I think the backstory to this is kind of interesting, so I'll try to be brief with it. But David Lean, the director, the reason he ended up making this movie is because he saw a stage version of this story that was adapted by and starring Alec Guinness in the role that he plays in the movie, Herbert Pocket. So he sees this stage adaptation, likes it so much that he ends up, founding this project, and he actually, adapted the movie himself, and it's not really taken from that stage script, but he brought over a lot of the people from it, including Alec Guinness and Martita Hunt as Mrs. Havisham. And this is Alec Guinness's first film role. That's probably of note. And they would go on, Lean and Guinness, to make 6 more movies together. So they were kind of a duo. What about either of you? Do you have any interesting backdrop to make sense of this thing for people?
Well, it's interesting that you say that the film is not, the final script is not adapted from the stage production, because the film feels a lot like a stage production in the way that the scenes are organized and things like that. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I also know that stage productions were a really important part to a lot of folks in the war era. I know that Sartre had a lot of inspiration pulled from stage production. I feel like in the war era, going to a stage production was really meaningful. So I think it's really fascinating that he pulled his inspiration from the stage production and then turned that into a film.
Yeah. Justin, what about you?
Yeah, good context and points. I'd just like to point out that, it all kind of comes back to the original and most important topic. And in later years, when Alec Guinness played a character we know as Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars A New Hope, as it was called in the old year of 77, he is able to scare the sand people away by making the noise of a crate dragon. So,
oh my god. Yeah, no, I was going to go there. I'm so glad you covered that point because it really does bring important context to the conversation. Overall, I think this, I hate you so much. This was brought about and I think perceived as more of a prestige film, right? Like a big studio piece with actors, a lot of them with stage backgrounds, which isn't that uncommon. but that brings a little bit more gravitas, and I think it's supposed to be kind of presented and received as such, and that kind of played into my my reception of it. And I don't know about you guys, but we can get into our reception of it in the next section, which is what's it saying. Justin, give us if you can, kind of a compacted, dragon-free plot summary.
Oh, dang, dude. You know me too well. Okay, yeah, so here we have the story of Pip, who lives and grows up with his, older sister and her husband, who's the local blacksmith. Story starts out where he is kind of tiptoeing through a creepy-looking cemetery, and it's foggy and dark and stormy outside, and he's going to go pay his respects to his mom and dad because this is a Dickens story and he's an orphan. And alas, as he's just trying to do his, filial duties for his deceased and departed folks, I mean, we've all had it happen to us, but a convict, busts onto the scene and says, "Hey, dude, check it out. I'm going to murder you." And there's several instances of him telling him how he's going to eat his liver, or how a young man that's with him that he can't see is going to eat his liver. So he frightens the poor little Pip into getting him something to eat and bringing him a file so that he can get out of his chains. Anyway, Pip does so. The next day, he even brings him a little bit of brandy, and doesn't see that guy. Well, I guess they do capture him in this version shortly thereafter, and he sees him off when he's the police or whatever have caught him again. So then he doesn't really see that guy for many years later. And at the shortly after that, he is invited to go to a Miss Havisham's house, and Miss Havisham is a very old and eccentric lady who is not related to Mrs. Doubtfire, and whom wants Pip to come and play with a similarly aged little girl named Estella, who is in her care and custody, but who is not her daughter. Anyway, dude, it's a Dickens story, so I don't really know how to give a concise plot summary here, but I'll keep going, and you just tell me when to tap out, and we'll do like a WWF thing, okay?
Yeah, just broad strokes.
Okay, yeah, broad. So, Pip is told later, when he's 14 or 15 or 20, I don't remember, guys, whatever. If you're still listening to the podcast at this point,
he's a man now. He's a man.
Give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah.
He turns older, as people do when they don't die, and he
all the dragons are listening at this point, Justin.
So here's what happens: he gets older, and he gets some good news. Well, Pip, you know what's gonna happen now? You're gonna be filthy rich, and it's not the Beatles that have told him this. No, it's a lawyer. And so guess what? He is able to live in London and learn the ways of being a gentleman, which doesn't apparently include much more, at least in this movie, than Alec Guinness telling him things like, Pip, we don't shove so much food in our cheeks at once, old chap. It's rather beastly of you. And that's kind of it. I guess he just kind of figured the rest out on his own and bought really expensive clothes and took up fencing. I guess that's what gentlemen do in that world. Anyway, getting on with this super duper summary that I'm giving. Pip eventually gets an unexpected visitor who's the dude from the cemetery in the beginning. What? But you're saying, what? It's been so long. How would that dude know where to find him? What is going on right now? I'll tell you what's going on, okay? Here's what's going on. That guy, whose name is Abel Magwitch. Abel Magwitch was the guy that gave him all the money, okay? Abel Magwitch made buku dinero over in Australia. Okay, apparently being a shepherd.
It was Argentina.
I thought it was
Argentina?
They said Wales.
New South Wales.
Oh gosh. What else was I watching this week?
Was that a test?
The Australian mobsters. That's what you were watching. Yeah,
that's what I was watching. All right, continue.
Wrap it up,
South America.
Man.
Yeah. Hey, you got it, man. I got to be off to do Braveheart next.
Yeah.
Or no, crap. What's the one with Sean Connery where he's the dragon?
Literally called Dragonheart, if I'm not mistaken.
Dragonheart. That's right. Oh man, one of my favorites. Okay, so Magwitch is like, hey, young man, check it out. I gave you all that money. Isn't that pretty cool? And Pip is like, what are you doing here? This is not going to be safe for you. I feel like, I got some bad mojo. Muddy Waters does not show up at this point.
Not
Unfortunately, he not yet, but we're not to the end. Okay, so he's like, oh my gosh, I feel really bad for Magwitch. Let's get him out of town, and I will go with you, Magwitch. They hatch a plan to get him out in a boat so none of his enemies see him, because Magwitch has got enemies because he used to do bad stuff with bad people. You know what I mean? So anyway, they try to get him out, and oh man, holy crap, it doesn't work. Because one of his enemies is like there and is like told the police, and it's like a problem. So guess what happens? When police try to get people into custody and there's boats involved, somebody's going in the water, okay? It might be because they want to. It might be because they don't want to. It might be because they don't want to go to jail. You just never know. But here's what happens. Magwitch goes in the water, comes out, he gets really sick in the body. All the body parts are not doing well after that. And so he goes to the infirmary, and around this time, oh my gosh, I think the end is in sight here. Around this time, Pip finds out, through other smaller plot points that would take me too long to kind of recap, because this is not a recap. This is just Genesis chapter 5 through 15. And here's what happens now, folks, okay, if you're still listening. If not, just fast forward like 2.5 minutes and I'll probably be done. And you can listen to somebody else talk. Okay, so he finds out, oh my gosh, Estella, love of my life, that little girl that I've been playing with like forever, she is actually Magwitch's daughter. And he's like, man, this is earth-shattering. So he tells Magwitch as he's dying, I love your daughter, man. It's like, it's going to be okay. It's not okay. Magwitch dies. Okay, so not okay for him. It is okay for Pip. He goes back, finds Estella at Miss Havisham's old house. By the way, she burned up to a crisp. She became a Dorito. And he finds her at her house by herself. And he's like, what are you doing here? I just came here to like snoop around and like reminisce. And there was like voiceover flashbacks going on in my mind. It was like kind of cool. Now you're here. What's going on? She's like, I'm just going to live here and kind of turn into Miss Havisham Jr. And he's like, no, check this out. And he rips off the curtains, okay? It's dusty, it's gross. I didn't see any dragons, which was a bummer. And Light comes in, and then Estella's like, oh, Light, okay, you want to, like, be lovers? And they're like, yeah, the end. Okay, and that's your recap.
Wow. I'm giving you a round of applause. That was something.
Thank you.
I don't even know if segues are possible. But I will say it's a coming of age story, and I feel like we all just came of another age listening to you recap it. All that to say, I think the tongue-in-cheek recap has a lot to do with the fact that, let me just say, like from my experience, Justin, we both just read Tale of Two Cities, just happened to be reading it at the same time, and I think both of our takeaways in the end was like, first half of the book kind of feels like the first half of this movie. Like it's not bad. Like there's no bad writing, but it's like long-winded at times, right? Like it's a little long in the tooth getting from A to B or whatever. And then like the last half, even the last third of that book, especially the ending moments are like amazing. Like right. So like some of the best stuff like storytelling wise that I've ever read. And watching this movie through hour one, I'm thinking I've never like checked to see how much of the movie is left more, I don't think, than watching this, because it's just kind of dry. You know what I mean? It's just kind of dry. And I can imagine, and maybe Ellie, no, you haven't read it yet, but I would imagine someone who has read this once or twice can attest to the fact that it might have that sort of Tale of Two Cities kind of pacing, whether that's a problem or whether you're into that. And I think the best way to approach this might be just to break down a couple sequences that are of note that really have, significant events happen, and then some themes. Because like regardless of how dry the first half is and how much the second half moves, there's like taking all of it into account. There's a lot of stuff happening thematically by the end, right? Like the story is trying to say quite a bit about a few different things. Ellie, what like overall theme do you think the movie is like pronouncing most articulately? Like what is the story really trying to say to the viewer?
Mm. Well, I will say about the pacing, that is pretty typical of, I think, most of Dickens' works, is
Yeah.
that the first half or so is doing a ton of exposition that seems kind of all over the place, and
Right.
like you don't quite know how the pieces all fit together. And then, just like in A Tale of Two Cities, everything comes together right at the end, and it's this really amazing, revelation.
Yeah.
I think, the movie Great Expectations has obviously that same format, but it kind of strips all of the good parts and all of the delicious parts out, and you're just left with kind of this bare skeleton where you don't quite know, what's coming next. And like the three sections at the beginning where you have the graveyard scene and then going to Miss Havisham's, is that what it is? Havisham?
Nailed it.
Oh, really? Great. Havisham, and then like all of a sudden he gets a fortune. You're like, how are any of these things related? And yeah, actually same thing. It's funny that you were checking the time because we actually watched it in 2 sittings.
Oh, I did too. I gave up
Yeah.
after hour 1 for the day,
Yep.
and I had to watch the second hour the next day because I was like,
Yes.
I can do another hour of this, but I gotta wait like one day.
Yep. We stopped right when he like meets Estella again. It's like, Estella.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like that.
Spot on
moment.
accent. Yeah, perfect.
Thanks. Yeah, it wasn't, Tennessee Williams, Stella.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. But it was Estella. So yeah, we did stop it there because we were like, okay, I think we're good for now. And then the second half was a lot more rewarding. As far as themes for the viewer, it's really interesting when you talk about adaptations because you're kind of wondering what were they trying to accomplish by adapting a film? What is it that they want to say that needs to be said? And this is where I think noting that it was a stage production that inspired him first, I think is important. Because it wasn't that he was just sitting around reading Great Expectations one day and thought, we should turn this into a film. It's that he saw it on stage and thought, this would make a great film.
Yeah.
So I think one of the themes that is important for the viewer in this era, I think, is the final scene. Can we go to the final scene already?
Yeah, we can jump around because there's
Okay.
no point in going sequentially. Justin already covered everything.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's right. Is the tearing down of the curtains in Miss Havisham's room, and kind of letting in the light and kind of airing things out. It's a lot of catharsis there at the end, which is kind of unwarranted in a lot of ways because things haven't, like, nothing has been terrible. I mean, I know that Mr. What's his name died. Magpie.
Magpie, that's it. Yeah.
That's it. So that was kind of traumatic, but then also kind of not because he thought he was a convict like 3 weeks before, and then now he's dead, but also he gave him money. So there's just like a lot of emotions going on there, I suppose. But then, of course, you love Estella, and you don't want Estella to become the second Mrs. Habershaw. So tearing down the curtains, I think, and like the running out into the open, for me was a lot of like casting off escapism, like you were talking about a little bit earlier with the war. Like, let's get out of yucky London and let's just be lovers. So that's a theme.
Yeah. The so the ending that you just referenced in the movie is pretty close to the ending in the book that got changed, right? So there's this whole thing that happened with the book where it came out with one ending which is more ambiguous. I don't know every detail of that, and if somebody does, please feel free to pounce and fill in the blanks. But generally, the gist of it is like you're not sure if they end up together, but he does make a stab at it, at the end. But it ends more ambiguously. And in the movie and in the revised ending of the book, there's no question. It's like, let's go be lovers, like you said. And I think there's a few characters here that we could kind of land on that are worth talking about. But honestly, I don't really think Pip is one of them. I don't know how you guys feel, but like, of all the people in the story that move parts around and get the plot going in a direction, he's so acted upon and not making a lot of choices for himself. Like, and this is to a degree in this movie, that we've said that about other like characters before, Justin. Like they just lack agency, and therefore, like I don't know
Right.
how to root for them. In this case, it's like on steroids, right? Because he's in the graveyard, and a guy's like, I'm going to kill you unless you bring me bread and a file, and what, or victuals or whatever, and a file. So he does it because he doesn't want to die. That's not really like decision making. That's like forced his hand, right? He gets a little older. Well, this wealthy benefactor wants to finance you becoming a gentleman. Okay, great. I guess I'll go do that for a while. And then, oh, hey, you give this much money, per annum, per year or whatever. Well, now you're going to have this much money per year. Oh, well, your benefactor is, it's Magwitch. Surprise, surprise. And, all of this stuff that's happening to him, he's not really making any decisions, you know what I mean? Like as a character. So I don't really know how I'm supposed to be interested in him, because he's kind of just like a ball in a pinball machine, kind of being bounced around the story. But there are characters that did grab me more. And the one that grabbed me the most is Joe, because he is so sympathetic and so like human. And the first example we get of that is Magwitch gets captured in the first part of the story when Pip is still young, and Pip is there with them for a reason. When they're catching these criminals, right, out on the mud, Magwitch sees him, and he doesn't rat the kid out. He doesn't rat the kid out, and then they're taking him away on the boat, and Magwitch makes a point to say, I want you to know that I stole the stuff. I don't want you to place blame on the boy, basically. So they humanize Magwitch in an interesting way at the beginning, instead of just making him like, I'm going to take everyone down with me, right? He really takes that compassion. I don't know how you can call it compassion when you threaten someone's liver being eaten out of them, but fair enough. He's in a desperate situation. But in that moment, we see Joe show him like real mercy, right? Like Joe says, I would never wish you to starve no matter what you've done. You know what I mean? So immediately I'm drawn to this character because he does something that he doesn't really need to do from a narrative perspective. He could have said, you dirty villain, why'd you take our stuff? Be gone with you. And he does the opposite. And then later on, the moment that I liked with him is a specific line of dialogue, which kind of leads into another theme, which is just, class. Obviously, we have like lower class folks and aristocratic folks, and this whole idea of being gentlemanly or whatever. Like the character of Estella is really pushed into this life of like loveless, relationships, and building a network of important people around her, but she just has really no ability to make her own decision, or no care to make her own decisions. But when Joe visits him in London, he comes and he even says, I think it's a good voiceover actually, he says like, if I was honest with you, I would rather have not met him because he looks so awkward in his suit and whatever. Joe comes up to his apartment. He says a really quick thing, and then he's like, I have to go. And he's like, you're not going to go. You must stay and have supper or whatever. And he says, I'm in the wrong clothes, Pip. Right? Like there's this, I think that's really kind of beautiful, honestly, because he looks it and then he just says it to the audience, and you just see like this man who really does have some real compassion and real pathos or whatever. He recognizes the disparity there, and he's like, I can't coexist with. I love you, I still have compassion for you and care for you, but I can't exist with you anymore. So there's class stuff in here that's interesting as well. Justin, what do you think about Joe Gardry, played by Bernard Miles?
Yeah, I found Joe really captivating in the children's version I've read,
Yeah,
ad nauseum, and in this too. I think he is probably the most human. He's the one person you can really root for. I think who's given enough, where you have an option to root for them or not, unlike a lot of other characters. I also enjoy some of the nuances with Magwitch that exist in this film and in the source material. Just Magwitch's explanation, like Pip asks him pointedly in this film, why would you bother helping me? Why would you give me all this money? When all I did was really give you some food. And he said, I had a kid once and I lost her, and I don't really want to talk about that, but I kind of thought of you as my kid when I saw you out there, And so in the fact that he knows, and in his dying breath, that his daughter does live, and that she and Pip might have a future. I don't know. There's something redemptive about that. I
Yeah.
think, even if it doesn't redeem Magwitch, I feel like it is communicated that in no way exonerates Magwitch, but it does put him at a greater sense of peace than I think that character has really ever known.
Yeah.
So it's a small thing really, and if that had taken up more of the movie, it'd probably be a much better movie. Or if something, even if it's Joe, if this story was told from Joe's perspective, it'd be a lot different, obviously.
Right.
But frankly, it might be for the better, at least on film.
Yeah. I think that the familial themes are the ones that stuck out to me like almost all the time, right? Like this, like you can't really get around the fact that this is a story about like lost family members, or like you can kind of break down every character in this story to like foster parents of some kind and like lost children of some kind, and like an adoptive sort of element thrown in there, and in all kinds of ways, right? Like Miss Havisham, she has Estella who she's taken in. Magwitch, in a way, becomes this father figure to Pip, at least financially. This is how he is trying. Like you said, Justin, it's not like perfectly redemptive, but he is trying to repay some sort of debt of mercy and compassion in a sort of a paternal way. And then Joe is also a father figure to Pip. Obviously, after Pip's sister, she got dead, and so there's a lot of that going on. And in the end, the only let's see, if we take the original Dickens ending and it's ambiguous as to whether or not Pip and Estella really end up together, the only happy people in it are Joe and his wife, right? Like they're just
Right.
like happy and on the water's edge, and like we plan to have many happy years together. We plan to have children together. But like my frustration, especially in the first half, but really to the end, is like, are these characters that are supposed to be the most important, are they going to take power over their own story, or are they just going to keep like being acted upon? And one example of that is like, does the debt matter? Like there's this whole thing about a certain amount of money a year, and he racks up all this debt, and then it's like, why? Like at the end, it's never like he's crushed under the weight of his debt. It's usually he just gets more money, So like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that, other than just to sort of build up the specter of who is the benefactor. Ellie, what did you think of like family stuff throughout? What did you read there?
Yeah, I thought the relationship between the country and the town
Yeah.
was really interesting to watch unfold, because it seems like the town, which is where Pip goes to become who he wants to be, is in fact where there isn't much to find. Like he is hollow in the town. He racks up debt, which, by the way, like has so much is left out of the movie from what I know of the book, and maybe this is in the children's version. Justin, I'm curious to know if it talks about how he like squandered all the money that he was given.
Really just hinted at in the movie. It's
Right.
like a passing point.
Right, but I think that's actually really important for Pip's character development, of which there is none
Right.
in the movie. It's just like, oh, you overspent. Look at all these debts. Well, you had 250 pounds a year. Now you're going to have 500. And it's like, what? Is he being rewarded for going into debt? Like that was confusing to me. So, he goes to town, and Joe's uncomfortable in town, and he's uncomfortable with Magwitch in town, and Estella and him don't get along in town. And then you go back to the country, and of course there's still problems in the country, but then Joe and Biddy are in the country. Pip and Estella come together in the country. So there's this nice division between the two, and like what is real, and what is there to cling on to? Is it in the country or is it in the town?
Mm-hmm.
Another important point, Justin, is this in the children's book, is that the other convict is in fact the jilted, or he was the jilter for Miss Haversham.
Every iteration of the name is great to me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard. So like that's another broken family connection that I don't think is actually addressed in the movie that is really important and kind of draws everything. Like that is Estella's father is the
Yeah.
other Scarface.
The lawyer unwinds that story for us in the movie, right? He like explains, well, this is what happened, and it's so Mrs. Havisham was basically left at the altar for reasons, and the guy who is after Magwitch is that guy, and you never get that in the movie, right?
No.
Like they don't even bother touching on that. Is that in the children's story, Justin? I don't know what they do with
So what was the first thing? Not the second conflict, Ellie, but the first thing that you asked about. The debts, right?
Yeah.
The debts.
Yes, that is articulated much more deeply in the books, and essentially it forces him out of London, at least in the children's version, and kind of back to the country. Whether or not that's in the source material, I can't say, obviously. With the convict, that part is not in there at all. And frankly, having watched the movie, because they don't do anything with that character like Dickens does with the original, it seems like such a wasted opportunity. Just like he doesn't need to be in there. That first scene loses nothing if he's not in there, and they just catch Magwitch. And nothing is lost if we don't know. They've already told us, hey, Magwitch has enemies. Okay, I don't need to see a face for that. If the cops just appear, we'll just assume, oh, I guess some enemies ratted on him, right?
Right.
So it just seems, I agree that it seems very superfluous, purposefully superfluous, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last thing I'll probably say about relationships is it's interesting to see the two. You're right that there are two happy endings, which is Joe and Biddy, and then Pip and Estella. So Joe and Biddy are only happy after Pip's sister dies.
Right.
Right. So you have loss there. I don't even know what her name is. Do we know what her name is?
Yeah, we do. Where is it? I don't.
Well, Pip's sis.
Sis.
She dies, and then he finds love with Biddy, and then you have, so that's like in Blacksmith Land, and then nearby in Haversham Land you have Miss Havisham being jilted by her fiance, so there's loss there, and then you have Estella coming along as the second Miss Havisham, and she finds love with Pip.
Right.
So that's a nice little like juxtaposition right there between the two of those couples.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is probably done better in the novel, but there's a lot of like bookendy stuff, right? And they get some of that like visually. Justin, I'll ask you about the cinematography, but I feel like that's the best part of the movie, and it won an Oscar for that, but like it's really, really well photographed, and like there's silhouette stuff in the beginning that's really good. The whole graveyard sequence looks pretty good. Everything around Miss Havisham's manor or whatever, like it creates perfectly acceptable kind of moody, weird atmosphere for that character to have a backdrop to. And then when you get to the end, you get the same kind of shot of Pip in the doorway of that manor, like as a black silhouette against the dead garden where that clock face is frozen. So it looks good, I think. Justin, what did you think?
I mean, it looks good. To me, there's not a lot that's really, not that every movie needs to try to be groundbreaking or, reinvent the wheel. Sometimes we just want a well-told story. And I think I desire more from cinematography because I feel like we don't really have that, the former, a well-told story.
Yeah.
So, I did enjoy, there's one kind of weird sequence where, he's kind of stunned at the revelation. And, you know what I'm talking about. And it's kind of like stars in his eyes and it's from his point of view.
Yep.
And he stumbles back and the way it is Lynchian. I have seen that. I've seen David Lynch use that same shot.
Yeah.
And so I really liked that.
He's like floating through the crowd, and then he like ends up in bed, just sort of in one weird cut, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So I enjoyed that, but if I can make one more note about the children's version, I think it is interesting that the version that I've been reading to my children is the original ending.
Wow.
It's
nice.
just. It's not that like they see each other, but then they just kind of like walk. There's no resolution. It's not like, and they lived happily ever after. That's not it at all. They're just kind of broken. And so I think this movie does it. Whether or not Dickens wants it to be a critique of this, to me it does seem like a serious critique of class, because the people in this movie that are most successful and happiest are the people in, like, I mean, the middle class doesn't really emerge till later in that century in England, right? But you do have Joe is kind of the closest representation we have of a middle class, if we can call it that. History people, please don't attack me yet.
Send
We'll
your
get to
dragons.
there when we come back to dragons. We'll talk about Marco Polo at the end. But then you see, everyone that's in the lower class is like a convict, or a criminal, or they're just destitute, right? And so obviously that system doesn't work, that enables those or forces those people to have to exist. And then you have the, if not aristocracy, then the gentry. Gentry is all just so vacant and so consumed by materialism and by their money that they have no heart to step out and to be, to lend a hand to any of these people. Generally speaking, I guess you could make the argument that Mr. Yeager's, the lawyer, does what he can by saving Estella, but in other avenues, obviously, he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So I think if there's anything that could be gleaned even from this movie with regards to that, I think Dickens is saying, possibly, the class it doesn't work. This is a broken system, and I mean, a lot of his other works, I think, dive more deeply into that. Ellie, you could, I can think of vaguely of two where that is kind of core to the plot, but I can't recall now what those are called. But I appreciate that. I think that's why Estella and Pip are kind of vapid, because maybe that's what Dickens is saying. Like, that's what this lifestyle, that's what this is.
Yeah.
It doesn't prepare you to be a real person, to have agency, to think of your fellow man. You have to be Joe. You have to actually work for a living, and you got to get your hands dirty, and you got to actually, be confronted with uncomfortable situations where you have to make sacrifices and make hard decisions. That's what makes us human. Having a boatload of money and being able to go out on your private yacht and go fencing every Thursday does not. It actually alienates us from our fellow man. So whether or not that's what he meant, that's what I think it might be saying.
Yeah. Okay. Lightning round time before we get to the what's it saying section and wrap things up. I just have a couple things here, and if you have a quick comment on them, go for it. I love the shot of Magwitch in the doorway when we find out that Magwitch is a benefactor. So that's good, I think. Did you both think it was good?
I mean, there was no dragon wings, so I was like, "Oh, I know what's coming," and then it did, and I was like, "Man, I can't read my notes. Too graphic for the air."
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about the shot of Magwitch compared to the shot of Joe.
Yeah.
Leaving.
Yeah. They're both silhouette-y, and it's a really good. Like, you can tell they set that shot up for hours probably to get all the lighting right and everything, and it's a reveal, so it kind of deserves that building up and whatnot. Okay, other lightning round items. What do you think about Estella in the movie, just overall in the story? Ellie.
She's the worst.
Moving on. No, Justin, what did you think about Estella?
Wow, does it have to be that pithy? I think it's a disservice, again, just based on reading Rainbow Time with Daddy Justin. It's she's a much more complex and subdued character. She's not just out there like, "Oh, I have no heart, ha ha ha, let me see who I can capture today." Not that Conan O'Brien plays her, Travis, but
that would be better.
It would be monumentally better. So I don't think it's an acting problem. I think it's a script problem where she's not the character. Like, how could you grow up under Miss Havisham and then be like, okay, time to be a social butterfly? Right. 2 and 2 make 5 in this movie.
Exactly.
I completely agree. I think that the whole switch up from when she's like flirting with the guy who, eventually jilts her, saying like, "No, I only have eyes for you, Pip." Like that whole scene with the dancing. For all that to be going on, and then just in the next scene, when you see her in Miss Havisham's house, she's saying, "Oh, well, he didn't want me because he found out my true parentage."
Right.
It's like, well, you didn't want him in the first place, so why are you now saying suddenly that you want him? So I think you're absolutely right. I think they did a complete disservice to her character. I think they made her super one-dimensional and also inconsistent at the same time.
A remarkable feat, yes. I think one thing that this movie has that we've seen worse versions of, so we'll give it a little extra point here is, young versions of a character and older versions of a character, right? We have young Pip and young Estella, and we have the adult versions of them. And the analog for this, Justin, is Wuthering Heights, right? We have
Right.
young Catherine and Heathcliff, and then old Catherine and Heathcliff. And I remember commenting on that movie, was like, everybody's good in this movie except the young people, especially young Heathcliff, if I'm not mistaken. He was the stinker, right? Yeah, because his British accent, and it was just weird, and he wasn't very, it's a kid actor, so it's hard to like crap on it too much, but it stuck out, right? I think this movie does it a lot better. Like the kid actors are really good. So that's great, but also like they physically look like their adult counterparts. So like physically and acting wise, good continuity between young and old. What did you think, Justin?
Yeah, I agree. I honestly wasn't really sure if maybe I should have put my glasses on, but I didn't know if they were whoever played younger Estella was just going to play the adult Estella,
right?
Too, depending on how many years in the future they went. But yeah, no, I mean, it's all good. I don't have a clap clap from me. That's what you get, David Lane.
Okay. And last lightning round item, and then if you guys have anything else to throw in here, we'll do that. Alec Guinness, right? Like
Yes.
you obviously brought up the Star Wars connection, because that's where I think a lot of people probably first saw Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that was like a big deal and still is a big deal. And it's just kind of blah, like I don't think he's bad in this, but it's just not a lot for the character to do, kind of a thing.
It's like a cousin of David Niven in any movie that we've seen.
In Wuthering Heights, if you will. But like he's not bad. He's doing everything he can, but like, what does he get to do? He gets to be in the apartment in the flat with Pip, and he gets to tell him, not to shove too much food in his face. The only thing I thought was they're definitely going to use this footage to CGI a young Alec Guinness face on something in the future. Yeah. What was your take on Alec Guinness here, Ellie?
Yeah, it was so funny when we realized it was Alec Guinness. We were like, wait, go back.
Yeah.
What was that? Hold on.
Yeah.
Because neither of us had ever seen him in a role so young. It was really fun. Kyle was also commenting that, my husband was commenting that he's like, I've never seen Alec Guinness smile in like hardly any roles. So that was kind of fun to see a different side of him. I also feel like they did a disservice to Herbert, because that relationship, like the friendship between Pip and Herbert, I feel like should have been so much richer and should have given so much more. And we're talking about all the different relationships in Great Expectations. That one is just kind of like one that's along for the ride, and you don't really get much more out of it. But it was really fun that it was Alec Guinness, and also fun that it was him that was in the stage production who moved on to the
this is his screen debut. I mean, so that's of note, but it's sort of like, someone popping up in something else, and you're like, oh look, that's that person, and they're gone. That's kind of it. All right, anything else in what's it saying? Anything we didn't cover, Justin or Ellie?
Not really anything important for me, and sadly, this is not even about dragons. But there is a portion where he gets he being Pip gets called back to Mr. Yeager's helper guy. I don't remember that guy's name, and his like dad is in the room, or just an old guy. Yeah, and he is deaf, and it's a Coen Brothers moment, really.
So
I mean,
weird,
it's just great, and that's one scene I think which really indicates that the movie overall is kind of lukewarm and kind of dead, unfortunately, because that scene that's alive, just for the presence of that one character and them actually interacting with him. Yeah, everyone actually has agency in that scene, which is really, I'm not even trying to make a joke. It's just like they choose to interact with this guy. And, the rules of the game are just nod at him every now and then and he'll be happy. And it's like, who has not interacted with that person, either in a foreign language or your old uncle, Like, I think most people have had a similar kind of experience. So I enjoyed that for the...
That was my favorite scene in the entire movie. I loved it. We were dying. We were laughing so hard. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. This is a romp, let me tell you, folks. If you want a good chuckle... Just scroll to minute, whatever, hour and 40 or whatever, hour and 20, whenever that happens. And Yeah. Okay. One last thing, because I remembered it. I think that from a filmmaking perspective, they really nailed the hanging thing. The moment where he's in,
Agreed.
Nice.
yeah, he's in the office. He's talking to the lawyer, and he looks out, and he's sort of talking about consequences and whatever, like some meaty stuff or whatever. He looks out, and there's people, at a gallows, and there's a huge crowd around. And we've seen this done a lot of different ways on film too. I think it's really well done in the Coen brothers, to bring it back to the Coens, their True Grit. There's a similar kind of sequence, but he looks out, and they're kind of finishing whatever chit chat happens before you drop the floor out of people's gallows and hang them, and you don't hear anything. You know what I mean? You don't hear like snap, crunch, none of that. He looks, and then we see Pip only, and then we've seen the crowd, and then we hear nothing, and then like applause just erupts, right? And he has to turn away and wince, and the juxtaposition of the crowd just being elated, while we know something horrific just happened, is really powerful, I think, and interesting. I think we hit all. We tackled all the dragons in this story, and we're gonna wrap it up in our section called "Is It Worth Your Time?" So we have a patented question here, and I'll start off with our gracious guest, dragon expert 2.0. The key questions here are: is it worth your time? And if you would rewatch this, how often would you rewatch this, Ellie?
Okay, I'll put both questions together.
Nope, that's not an option.
Well, sorry, that's
I'm
what
just
I'm going
kidding. Go
to do. I think that I was trying to figure out like when would be the perfect time to watch this movie. And I think it would be really late at night in October. Because it's like kind of spooky, but also like it's okay if you fall asleep halfway through. So it's like one of those movies that you might have like a cup of hot cocoa. It might be Halloween or like close to Halloween. And you just kind of want to put something on in the background. And if you fall asleep, it's not the end of the world. So would I rewatch it? Yes, late at night in October. That's what I'm going to say.
Every October, or just like when you're 40, you might watch it again?
Not every October. Definitely not every October. But I'd say like, how every now and then you like kind of pick your head up out of the sand. You're like, oh, I haven't seen that movie in a while. It's like one of those.
All right. Perfect. Justin, how about you?
Man, well, that was great, Ellie. You put me there in the scene, so congratulations. I guess we'll read about that in your upcoming novella. Simple Simon over here thinks that I probably wouldn't watch it very much. Sure. Okay. Yeah, it's not a very good movie, in my opinion. It is vaguely spooky, but it's very bland. And if you enjoy salt on your meat like I do, and we don't eat dragons, don't even go there, Travis, okay? Protected class, okay? Not freaking funny. I'm not buying it. But if you enjoy salt on your food, whether it be meat or vegetables or a starchy carbohydrate, then you will not enjoy this movie. Case closed.
Okay. Well, I'll steer away from. I had some food metaphors planned too, but I'll table those. And just to say, I generally like Dickens. I know it's probably cliche, but like I love A Christmas Carol. It's just a really good story, and I think there's a reason that it's been adapted more than probably anything ever, on stage and in film. And I think the stuff that he attempts to say about like class and people and coming of age, the coming of age thing is pretty common for him. Is usually worth your time. I'm not a big fan of the form here. Like this kind of big budget studio level kind of prestige picture, top 5 BFI list, whatever you want to use to kind of hold this thing in high regard. That doesn't do it any favors. And the tonal inconsistencies where it doesn't quite go dark enough when it should, make the first hour bland, make the second hour feel kind of too compacted with all the themes to digest them properly. Sorry, that's food again. But I would not rewatch this. although I'm not like upset that I watched it once. I didn't feel like it was a total waste of time. So if you're the kind of person who you want to kind of tick the boxes of important films or, kind of big prestige adaptations, it could be worth your time. But I would rewatch this none times. From a pacing perspective, if at the hour mark, I'm like, oh, Miss Havisham just burned to death, and yay, I'm on board. That's probably not a good sign for the pacing of your film. Well, we read all of David Lean's 2-hour Great Expectations, and it was a little hit and miss. Ellie, thank you so much for joining us. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, thanks, Ellie.
I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yes, I think we'd be happy probably to have you back again in the future.
Yeah.
Next week we have The Big Sleep. We have a guest coming back. Who is that guest, Justin?
It's anytime.
Yes.
Buckle up for Bogart and Bacall, everybody.
Great alliteration. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.
Let the movie speak.